business people have to, and if they're not having to pay for all that overhead, they can hire people and get the economy going. And I think that hats off to Congresswoman Black from Tennessee for winning this prestigious Golden Turkey Award. I actually suppose the one who technically won it was the EPA. Is that right?
That's right. The EPA
but because
has
you
won
highlighted it, you get to be. Isn't there actually like a golden, some sort of like a bowling trophy with a big golden turkey in the top of it or something?
You're so right, and it's proudly displayed on my desk. It is a trophy that stands about 12 inches high, and it is golden and has a golden turkey on the top of it, and I'm challenging all of my colleagues to find places that we're having overregulation and killing our businesses and stifling the growth of our economy and stifling job growth.
Now, who says we can't have fun in cutting the wasteful spending out of government? At least do it with a little twinkle in our eye. And it is noteworthy that a freshman congresswoman could walk away with this kind of a prize. Certainly there will be competition to have that golden turkey passed around. And I appreciate your joining us tonight. And we have some other distinguished guests. My good friend, Congressman Wahlberg, I'm going to ask if you'd like to join us. We're talking a little bit, first of all, a big picture about how much money there is in the entitlements, the trouble with trying to balance a budget, and also we've talked about jobs and how jobs relate to a government that's out of control, has forgotten they're supposed to be servants, and are just running mad, making red tape, which again is excess overhead for the businesses and kills jobs. So, but please join us with your unique perspective.
Well, I appreciate my colleague from Missouri. Appreciate you holding this time this evening as we can talk about those things that impact our whole way of life in the United States. We, I'm sure, understand here on the floor this evening the impact of what our framers and founders had in mind of a limited government, a government that believed very clearly that free people, with the opportunity to be creative and use the resources that they have, could indeed make a life that was filled with happiness in their pursuit, that involved property and all that went with it. As the subcommittee chairman for workplace protection and workers' protection, I've had the opportunity to look at some things that are coming up right now that are being proposed as workplace safety standards. And this goes into cost issues that are huge regulatory costs, but also costs that ultimately reduce jobs and opportunity. One such of regulatory issues related to the noise regulation being proposed by OSHA. Fortunately, that has been pulled for the time being. It was pulled a couple days after we introduced the fact that we were going to hold hearings on it. Continue to hold hearings. We found out in the process that noise standards, and all of us here would say that a worker ought to be safe, reasonably speaking, in their workplace. I worked at U.S. Steel South Works shortly after high school, worked in the furnace division, worked on the mold platform, worked in the hooker shack, which was lifting and holding pig iron, and a number of other things. And I had reasonable expectation to be safe, including using hearing protection that involved either earmuffs or earplugs. What this new standard would have required would not have been simply putting earplugs into employees that would meet the standard or earmuffs, but would have required businesses to purchase machines that weren't only guarded or shrouded safely for hearing protection, but machines that would be reduced in the noise standard to a point that, as we looked in it more carefully, most likely weren't even machines made yet. They haven't been produced. So we're talking about businesses that want to employ people, that increase the economy, because you and I both know that the economy is produced in the private sector, not in the public sector. That the private sector entrepreneur, the taker of risk, produces an idea, comes up with it, ultimately hires employees to carry out the job, and then we put reasonable regulations to make sure that those employees are safe, that their hearing is protected as well. But we don't say to the employer, you must buy a machine that isn't even produced yet, that isn't made yet, in order to protect the environment.
I really appreciate your example, and you know, that's the trouble with these things. It's not that maybe there shouldn't be some workplace safety rules, but these things have just gone beyond the realm of what even makes sense. I have even greater respect for you now. I've also worked in a steel mill, and the noisy place at our steel mill was the pipe shop where they're loading the pipe. And you take a whole big bundle of pipe and drop it or hit it against something, and boy, does it make a racket. Oh, yeah. And so they always had ear protection and things in the pipe mill there. And certainly businesses know that that's necessary to do that. But when you start loading that kind of extreme red tape and regulations on a business, the business has to use their money to pay for all that, and they can't hire employees. Absolutely. And so red tape, first of all, taxes, red tape, those are job killers. And I think, as I recall, there was I think it was a gentleman last week that shared somebody that had a dry cleaning facility, and they found something like a spoonful of some water underneath a concrete slab that had a small amount of cleaning fluid, I guess carbon tetrachloride, in the water or something. And they had to do like a $60,000 remediation, which for a simple dry cleaner just about took every penny that the owners had out of their bank because of one teaspoonful with some water that had a little bit of, you know, the cleaning fluid they use on people's clothes. And that's what we're talking about. This is just bizarre kinds of stuff. You know, we have Dr. Bustani from Louisiana here, and I think he was going to share with us for a minute, and Congressman Walberg will come back to you. Congressman Walberg is from Michigan and a great member of the caucus. And Doctor, please.
Well, thank you. I thank my friend from Missouri for giving me time to speak here. You know, as we talk about American competitiveness and growing jobs, private sector jobs in this country, coming off the heels of this recession where we still have high unemployment, there are two aspects to it. One is cutting back on government spending, as you've already suggested with the pie chart you have there. We have to get our debt under control. This is imperative because it's going to strangle private investment in the form of higher taxes on the American people. But the other side of this is the growth side of the equation, stimulating economic growth. And if you look at how to do that, we want economic growth in the private sector, which will help spur job growth. The way we have to do that is we have to look at an energy strategy for the United States, because so much of what we do depends on cheap, affordable energy to fuel our plants, our factories, transportation, you name it. So it's critical that we have an energy strategy for the country, which we don't have, and we never have had one. And in fact, what you're seeing now, instead of the lack of an energy strategy, we're actually seeing energy proposals that are detrimental to the country that are being proposed by this administration. Let me kind of list what's going on. First of all, the moratorium on drilling for American energy in the Gulf of Mexico has been in place since May. This is killing jobs back home in Louisiana along the Gulf Coast, but it's also hurting our energy security in this country. As we lose these jobs, these are highly skilled workers, as they leave this industry and go to find other jobs and move, you cannot turn that light switch back on and get that kind of skill back on these platforms. That's number one. So as long as
wait just a minute. Just on the surface of what you're saying, you know, if somebody were really to listen to what you're saying, it sounds like insanity. Because here's what my thinking would be. You're saying that we've got all this unrest in the Middle East, which threatens the oil production there, which increases the cost of Middle Eastern oil, so we pay them even more to countries that don't like us and use the money for advancing terrorist kinds of causes.
That's exactly
And we
right.
have oil right under our feet, and we're saying, no, you can't drill for that stuff. And gasoline is $3 and something a gallon, and we're not even drilling for the silly oil that we've got. Now, let me add one thing that gets me even more fired up, and that is you go north of Louisiana. I mean, where it's cold. Okay, we're talking up out in the ocean outside Alaska, and you've got foreign countries that are drilling on what is basically our coastal plain, and they're drilling for oil. And here we are paying $3 something, and we're not drilling for any of this stuff. I mean, isn't this weird?
We have basically shut down our production in the Gulf of Mexico, and it's a boneheaded policy to do that. But not only that, the administration in its budget proposal is now proposing nearly $50 billion in new taxes on small independent oil and gas producing companies. Now, that's going to put a lot of these guys out of business. They can't cash flow, and they do a lot of the work on the continental shelf and in shallow water areas, and also our onshore production in oil and gas. And there's a distinction between oil and gas.
So here we are again, because I started just a little while ago. We talked about if you want to kill jobs, first of all, tax small businesses. Tax them so much they can't run their business, or at least chase people out of them, so there goes the jobs. The second thing you do is bury them in red tape. Now we're coming back to what you're saying is the very people we should want to be working and drilling for oil for us, we're going to tax them out of existence. Isn't that ridiculous?
It's ridiculous. And these taxes are indiscriminate. They hit oil companies, you know, those drilling for oil, but also natural gas. And there are many, even our friends on the other side of the aisle will admit that natural gas usage is a very important transition strategy as we look at our energy needs going into the future, whether for transportation fuel, electricity generation. Those taxes proposed by the administration will put a lot of these gas companies out of business. And keep in mind, 97% of the gas used, natural gas used in this country is produced here in this country by these small companies. A given rig will employ 65 people on one rig. So if a company that has, you know, let's say they have to cut back 50 rigs, do the math, you're talking, you know, 3,000 plus jobs. These are
the very jobs that we should be encouraging because we're so dependent on foreign oil.
These are private sector jobs, they're good paying jobs, and they help promote U.S. energy security. It's critical. So what we have is an administration that is proposing policies counter to what American interests are with regard to our energy security, and I would submit to you it hurts our national security as well. And I'm really worried about the situation in the country of Oman, for instance. It's right across the Strait of Hormuz from Iran. That strait's very narrow. 40% of the world's oil crosses through that strait, and if it were to shut down because of unrest in Oman and Iranian mischief, we could see oil prices spike up to $400 a barrel, and we'll pay a lot at the pump. It'll hurt our farmers, rice farmers back home who are trying to export rice and grow rice for domestic consumption. It will hurt our chemical manufacturing. And speaking of the natural gas piece,
you know, maybe I could just stop. I want to hit you with a gee whiz statistic because I'm kind of an old geezer. I've been here for a while, and I've watched voting patterns. And here's something that might be interesting to you. Yeah, and I tell this to some of my constituents back home. If I were to say that the Republicans and Democrats in the House are divided on the abortion issue, people would go, well, no big surprise. What I think is interesting is that if you look back over the years, at least the 10 years I've been here, the two parties are more divided on developing American energy than they are on the abortion subject. And I find that just amazing to me because it seems so obvious that we're still using gasoline in cars. Till we get away from that, we need to be trying to produce our own gasoline. We have very large reserves of oil that we could be drilling. And my understanding is on many, many of those locations where we could drill and hope to find oil, there are environmental lawsuits blocking drilling in all these different locations where we could legally drill, not mentioning Anwar, which is off bounds to us right now, and now the regulations in the Gulf, which, again, I don't have any problem if people want to say, hey, we need to see what went wrong with the oil spill. How do we make sure that when we get a very deep, high-pressure situation that we've got the proper devices to stop that up if we need to? But just to basically shut down and then tax everybody, this is just bizarre.
Well, it is bizarre. And again, Americans want to compete, and we know if given the opportunity to compete, we can win in the global economy. And we've got to have energy production in this country to allow our companies to compete. Now, let me point out something. one of the biggest areas of exports for the United States are chemicals, petrochemicals and other chemicals, fertilizer that's produced here, manufactured here in the United States.
Manufactured with?
Natural gas and petroleum products. And if you shut down our natural gas production, then our companies, which have a price, on a basis of price, we can compete because we have cheap natural gas here in this country compared to around the world. Our companies are competitive.
Now you haven't even mentioned the massive new supplies of natural gas they're finding, particularly under Pennsylvania. I mean,
exactly.
That's just an incredible find.
Yeah. We know we have the world's largest reserves in coal. We have potentially the largest reserves in the world in natural gas here in the United States. And some argue that the estimates on oil are vastly underestimated because of two things. One, the shale oil that's available that currently is off limits because of administration policy and environmental policies. And secondly, on the East Coast and West Coast, Outer Continental Shelf area, we don't have accurate seismic information. So when they say we only have 3% of the world's reserves, that's an inaccurate figure. That's not been thoroughly looked at with modern seismic activity. But our companies that manufacture these chemicals and fertilizer have a competitive advantage because of the low price of natural gas in this country. If we tax it, as this administration is proposing, it will actually make us less competitive. Our exports will go down, and it will be counter to what the President wants to do by expanding exports. It makes no sense whatsoever.
Well, I think what you're getting into, Doctor, is something I wanted to talk to a little bit tonight, and that is the assumption that you can just go taxing and always talk about the rich guy, and we're going to tax the rich guy, and think you can get away with that without consequences. Because it seems to me that there is a disconnect with the current administration and the Democrats as well, policy-wise, because they talk about the fact they want jobs, but then they destroy the companies that create the jobs. And you can't kill a company if you want jobs because the company is the one that hires people. And they seem to miss that connection in there. I'd like to go back to my good friend from Michigan. I had to check to make sure, Congressman Walberg. I'd want to give you a chance to jump into our discussion, but I'd like to talk a little bit in the direction about taxes, what happens with taxes, and how it is that we can deal with some of the tough problems budget-wise here. At least one piece of that is the proper tax policy.
Well, I appreciate my good friend from Missouri, again, holding this conversation tonight. And I think you're leading into the key point here. Because bottom line, when you talk about entitlement spending, those entitlement programs that we've come to expect in the United States, whether it be Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, and most of us, at least in this room tonight, have paid into Social Security a long time. It's not a voluntary...
Well, let's not get personal about age here now.
It's not a voluntary tax. In just a couple short years, I will be capable of receiving that myself. I have not had a choice to do that. And yet the only way that we can see those entitlement programs continue, at least if we did it right, is have an economy that's growing, have people that are employed, that are paying into the entitlement programs, the taxes that are there, even if we don't talk about any alternative way for younger employees coming down the road in the future, we still have to have the ability to put dollars in. That comes from having a job. And so when we go back to what Dr. Bistiani was talking about on the issue of energy, when we talk about the regulatory concerns that I expressed that are destroying jobs, I go back to my own home state of Michigan, my own district, the 7th District. Michigan, who led the nation for 4 straight years on unemployment. A state that was known for its manufacturing, its auto industry, always having jobs, high standard of living. And yet as a result of government growing too large, too strong, too intrusive, and spending too much and taxing too much, we've destroyed the economy of Michigan. And now the new administration comes in and has to go through almost insurmountable odds to try to restore an economy that has jobs so they can pay into this.
Now the thing, let me just ask you whether this gets under your skin. It's because I'm on the Budget Committee, but I hear all the time that my Democrat colleagues are saying the recovery is fragile, therefore don't you go cutting any of this government spending. And I'm just thinking, wow, because I totally don't see it that way at all. when you have a government that's busy spending money trying to regulate a milk spill in a barn,
right.
You have a government that's wanting to talk about rogue dust that comes off of a farm when you're basically running a combine through a row of corn, and you've got a government with duplication after duplication, and we're talking about let's cut just some of the edge of this stuff, and they're saying, careful, don't destroy a fragile economy. Hey, the economy is fragile because they're doing everything wrong to it.
Everything wrong. Everything to destroy it.
And the main thing that's wrong is, as Ronald Reagan said, we're buying too much government.
Right.
And please, go ahead. I didn't mean to get off.
No, I assumed I would get you into a rant on that because I know you're passionate about that. It's absolutely true. You know, I can show you from experience in Michigan as we went through this type of downturn back in the 80s, too large government, increased taxation, increased spending for all sorts of programs. We ran businesses out of the state. We turned that around in the 90s, and we cut taxes 26 times. We right-sized government. We put workfare and edufare in place of welfare. We encouraged businesses to thrive and grow. What happened? By reducing taxes, cutting spending, the economy grew. More revenue came in, and then government had to control itself from spending those revenues from less taxes, but still increased revenue because people were working. They were spending, they were saving, they were investing, they were taking care of themselves. Lo and behold, the American people, with their own intellect, their own intelligence, their own creativity, began to grow an economy that made things right for themselves, and then they had choice. They had opportunity. They could be creative. They could build new machines. They could build machines that met the noise standards that were presently available, as opposed to saying, we're going to create jobs by saying, you can't have this noise standard here, and you can't take care of it with an earplug or an earmuff. You're going to have to produce a machine that isn't there. And so look what we're doing. And my good colleague, I have a letter from OSHA that says that was part of economic development plan, to encourage the development of new machines that would meet these noise standards so that then you would have new jobs. Well, wait a second. The people that would produce those, and more importantly, the people that would buy those machines, could not do that because they couldn't afford it. So here's big government again with its own ideas that ultimately destroys an economy. And when you get into entitlements...
Let's take a look at, you just talked about an example from the great state of Michigan, and it just hearing you talk about it just made me feel good. It's America on the move again. It's individual citizens taking risks, going out there working hard, making a good living, and then because of the things they've done, other people get better jobs and they make a better living, and everybody does better. I mean, you cannot ignore the fact that the standard of living that we enjoy in America is because a whole lot of people could be free.
Right.
Free to succeed or free to fail.
Right.
But it's called free enterprise. Now, let me give you another example that occurred when I was a congressman here, and I think the beginning of when you were. And that was that Bush, the second Bush, G.W. Bush, copied the example of JFK and Ronald Reagan. And both of those presidents understood that when the government cuts taxes in the right way, it actually gets the economy going. In fact, what happens when you cut taxes the right way, the government actually gets more revenue. Now, that sounds weird. Let me just try and explain. I've done this a couple times before, but tell me if you think it makes sense. How is it that the government can cut taxes and get more revenue in? Well, think about it. Let's say you're king for a whole year, and the only thing you can tax is a loaf of bread. And so you start thinking, if I put a penny tax on that loaf of bread, I can figure out how much bread people are eating and figure out how much you get for tax revenue. Then you think, hey, how about I put $10 tax on every loaf of bread? Then you think, maybe people wouldn't buy any bread. So you start to think there's probably an optimum point where you can put some tax on the bread. People will still be eating bread, but you'll get your most revenue. Well, that's what goes on. Here's an example. May of 2003. Were you here in Congress then?
I was not.
Okay. You were thinking about it, though, perhaps.
I was thinking about it.
Good for you. Anyway, May 2003, we cut 3 taxes. Not popular, because everybody, oh, the Democrats, oh, that's all rich guy stuff. It was capital gains, dividends, and death tax. Now, I don't know if you're a rich guy, if you're dead, but anyway, we're going to tax death. We tax everything else, so why not that? So we cut capital gains, dividends, and death taxes. at this time right here. Now, I've got 3 charts and shows what happened. This is job creation before and after the tax relief. This is some of the taxes we extended into this year. Okay? This is the lines that go down are job loss. They're by month, and the lines that go up are job gain. And so what you have here, right here, is that's the tax relief goes into effect. And take a look at the more lines coming up over here. I mean, that's really pretty substantial and pretty interesting, whereas these you're losing. So this tax appears to have had a good effect. Let's check it on not just job creation. Let's check it against...
You meant the tax cuts, the tax relief.
Cuts, yeah. The tax cuts.
It gave incentive. Yeah.
So the tax cuts go into effect, same place here, this line. This is the GDP. This is actually losing GDP or gaining. You can see the average here is about 1.1%. But after those tax cuts, it jumps to 3.5. You can see these are a lot stronger economy. So the economy seems to do better when you allow business people to take the money, put it in their business, create jobs. There's more people working, more tax revenue comes in. Well, does more tax... wait a minute, you cut taxes, that means your revenue is going to go down? Well, let's see what happened to revenue. Here's the story. Here's the tax cut right here. The revenue has been going down. They cut the taxes, and 4 straight years of increase in revenue. So what's happening there is that actually, if you do the right kind of tax cut, just as you say, you get the free enterprise system working, and you can turn the economy around. JFK understood that. He did it. It worked for him. Ronald Reagan did it. They said, oh, trickle-down economics and all this kind of stuff. But it worked. In fact, here's another chart. This is the tax rate on the most wealthy people. This is this red line. It started at 90%. It's come down. You notice as the tax on the wealthy people comes down, the amount of federal revenues goes up. Now, that's weird. Why would that be? It's the same principle. You can overtax and basically run the economy into the dirt.
Isn't it the simple principle that what you give incentive, you get more of, and what you discourage, you get less of?
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
And you give incentive to people to use their own resources with American exceptionalism and let the market forces work. Everybody benefits.
And we started out tonight talking about the overall fiscal problem we have in America and the fact that it's really unique. This is a pretty scary situation that America's in. And the solution, as Ronald Reagan said, the solution is simple, but it's not easy. And the solution really comes in 2 sides. The first is we have to be cutting all of what the government is spending. We have to do some cuts. But on the other hand, what we have to do is to selectively do the tax cuts to allow the economy to really get back in a strong recovery. The one thing I agree with that the Democrats are saying is that the recovery is fragile. I think they picked that up from Bernanke, the secretary, but I think it is. And I think it's fragile because of the fact we've still got the problem of excessive taxes, excessive red tape, and a whole lot of uncertainty in the markets.
And a lot of spending.
If we can do those, that's going to help. So the first thing is we've got to cut taxes, but we tremendously have to cut the overhead. And the thing here, and I think the public is becoming aware of this fact, we can't make it by cutting defense and non-defense discretionary. That was a budget we were doing 2 weeks ago on the floor. We cut $100 billion out of that. If you know what the real problem is, as we talked about earlier, the total of these entitlements plus debt service is $2.2 trillion. The federal revenue is $2.2 trillion. You can zero this and this out, and you just barely have a balanced budget, and that's not talking about the out years when it gets worse. Right. So these areas must be dealt with. Now, supposedly, if you talk about changing anything with Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid, lightning will fall, and you'll be struck dead politically. But the fact of the matter is we must deal with these. How we deal with them is one of those things that we need to have a conversation on it. But to do what the President did and submit the 2012 budget and not deal with these at all is being disingenuous. It's kicking the can down the road and ignoring this massive problem, which is a little bit like that gorilla in the tent. I started, my dear friend from Michigan, I started by talking about, and it's sort of, sometimes I think about this, what would it be like to be in the year 1850 and be a congressman or senator, and you have this huge issue of slavery, and we didn't deal with it. Right. We just ignored it, and then we got slammed by the Civil War. And my question is, are we as Americans going to deal with the fact that our entitlements are using, debt service is using up the entire revenue of the country? I mean, that's not just a little bit of a budget problem. That says we have a fiscal crisis on our hands, and we're responsible, and our American citizens that elected us here expect us to deal with this problem. And the first way to deal with it is to at least acknowledge that we got the problem.
And I believe that more and more people, even those that are using the entitlements, Social Security, Medicare, understand that and are growing in their fear that unless we do something, they indeed will be hurt. But I think that you and I together, and many who are of like mind, understand that we must do something, but we can do something that's better. And we can do something that assures people that they will have what they expect.
That's exactly the point.
And we can do it the right way without the big government issues and getting down to that American exceptionalism that says we can trust people to do for themselves, if given the incentive and opportunity, better than what big government can do.
You see, the point of the matter is there's people who are dependent on these programs, older people, and they're going to be in trouble if the wheels fall off this thing. So what we need to do is craft a solution that allows the older people that are on these programs to stay there, and then as people become younger, give them alternatives and to have a transition so that you can get these costs under control. That is the way to manage a solution. Everybody's got to suffer a little bit, but at least we're not allowing the whole thing literally to crash like some sort of a train off the edge of a cliff.
Well, I think we give not necessarily the suffering idea. I think in doing something that's credible and the right thing to do, it gives people optimism that the answer is here. It will take some tough decisions, but ultimately the people who are in need will be taken care of. The other people with the great creativity, the American exceptionalism that's there, will find ways to do it and do it better and ultimately greater opportunity for the future, and that's optimism.
You know, and I think that is a thing that's so exciting because I don't think you're being a Pollyanna by saying what you just said.
Not at all.
And the reason I say that is because we have been through, as Americans, a lot of dicey situations. Our own parents, known as the greatest generation, as they would say it, did their bit. My father was with Patton in Europe, and they fought World War II. And then there was the days where Ronald Reagan came to a discouraged nation and he said, America's got brighter days ahead. And with that twinkle in his eye, and he had such a way of putting it, you know, that the solution is simple, but it's not easy. We have come to another one of those pivotal times in history where it is our responsibility to deal with a massive problem and not to ignore it and try to pretend it doesn't exist and just try to lie to people and let the government run a little longer until we're gone and then everything comes down in a big heap. That's not what the American public want of their leadership. And as long as you and I are kicking, my friend, we're going to stay here. We're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about the great days ahead for America and some of the different things that could possibly be. You know, we take a look at some of these medical costs. They're really busting the budget. Maybe one of the things we need to do is to say, hey, I think it was 1950, somebody calculated the cost of polio, that it cost us $1 trillion a year in America today, the polio costs. But they forgot something. We figured out a cure for polio. Maybe it's time for us to target the most expensive diseases, things like diabetes or Alzheimer's, or things that are very, very big ticket items. And maybe that's part of that American exceptionalism, to leave the world a better place, to leave our kids freer, not taxed into the dirt, to leave our economy the strongest of any in the world, that America could be a shining city on a hill, a light to the people around the world. That was the vision of our forefathers. Why don't we grab a hold of that and say, hey, we have got way too much government than we can afford. Let's turn loose the American people and let's not trust so much in government. I think that's the big question coming up. Do we really want more government more taxes, more spending, more debt, and less freedom? Or do we want more freedom and a whole lot less government, and the government that's there to really be a servant to the people and not have the attitude that they know better than everybody else? Don't you think that's where we are?
And I think the people spoke in November. And I think that speech they gave to us, my good friend, is that we must take this opportunity. This is our point in time. This is our date with destiny, as it were. If we back off from tackling the big things, we will not only lose there, but all of those little special things will be taken away as well.
Congressman Walberg, I'll tell you, with you and the other great people that work down here and the American public, I believe we can do it, and it's time for us to roll up our sleeves. Let's get busy cutting. Let's do the things the right way, design programs that work and not threaten people, and let's move forward, because there are brighter days ahead. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We yield back what little of our time is left.
The gentleman yields back. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 5th, 2011, the Chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Jackson, for 30 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let me express my appreciation to you and to the leadership of this Congress for allowing me 30 minutes to speak to my constituents, but also to speak to the American people about the central issue that confronts our nation and this economic crisis. Mr. Speaker, the central issue that has confronted every Congress that remains unaddressed, for which I want to talk about tonight, is unemployment. The unemployment rate in our country is too high. The Democratic message, job creation and create jobs. I respect that message. Republicans believe in tax cuts and tax breaks and pro-business perspective, which many Democrats support as well. And I believe that clearly economic growth is the path to job creation. But for the unemployed in our nation, a very, very different category, the debate led by Democrats and led by Republicans in the Congress of the United States all too often ignores people who are unemployed. Unemployment is a very special category. Every member of Congress knows the numbers, but it's the American people who are feeling them. About 9% of the country is unemployed, based on the definition of unemployed that the Bureau of Labor Statistics uses. But in communities like mine, it's around 15%, and that's conservative. Some communities as high as 30% unemployment. And so when Democrats come to the floor of the Congress and talk about job creation for African Americans, for minorities, and for women, when we hear that language, because we're usually the last hired and the first fired, job creation isn't a message that touches my constituents. It's not a message that touches the long-term unemployed who find themselves in the barrios, the ghettos, and the trailer parks of our nation. So the question is, why Democrats and Republicans in Congress, both promoting growth, Republicans promoting tax breaks and tax cuts and limited government as a way to stimulate the economy, Democrats focusing on job creation as a way to stimulate the economy, which might include reasonable spending and deficit reduction measures. Why, in the midst of our conversation, led by Republicans in the majority and Democrats, unemployed Americans continue to grow? There's this huge category that Democrats are not speaking to and Republicans are not speaking to, but need to be addressed in order to strengthen our economy and change the present direction. You see, Mr. Speaker, if we can provide a job for every American, if we can eliminate unemployment just like we eliminated slavery, if we can eliminate unemployment just like as a nation we are trying to eliminate discrimination against women and against the disabled and against gays and lesbians of our nation, if we can eliminate unemployment, the way our system is actually set up, if every American is working, they pay into the system. And if they're paying into the system, it pays for future generations of Americans to take advantage of the entitlement programs that my colleagues who just left the floor were talking about. But if there's high unemployment in any given generation, it profoundly impacts the kinds of resources that are available for the federal government and local governments to handle basic programs that keep our nation strong in every succeeding generation for every American. Mr. Speaker, many Americans have been out of work for many months. They've stopped looking for work. So even though they have no jobs, they are not counted as unemployed. Over the last few months, I've called on unemployed, underemployed, and economically insecure Americans to send me their resumes and their stories so that I can keep unemployment front and center before our government. Unemployment. I did not say job creation. I did not say deficit reduction or tax reductions to corporations. I said unemployment. That thing that President Roosevelt talked about when he said, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself." President Roosevelt wasn't talking about the Russian bear. He wasn't talking about Nazis in Germany. He wasn't talking about fascism in Italy under Mussolini. He was talking about the deterioration of our national fiber and fabric from within, unemployment. And at that time that he was delivering that speech, Mr. Speaker, I know that my chart here is probably inadequate for the C-SPAN cameras, but the largest spike in our nation's history for unemployment between 1930 and 1945 is during President Roosevelt's administration. Now, in order to keep men content and women content in their homes, in their jobs, and actually believing in our country, that we would be working collectively as Democrats and Republicans to eliminate the idea of unemployment as a potential factor in the life of the American people. But no, we're talking about job creation, we're talking about deficit reduction, and somehow we believe that by moving the interest rates and the levers of our economy, that somehow corporations that have chosen to leave the United States and locate in foreign countries abroad, that somehow they're going to come back to America and provide us with enough work for millions of Americans who find themselves unemployed, underemployed, and out of work. So, Mr. Speaker, to demonstrate this shameful condition, I've called on unemployed and underemployed and economically insecure Americans to send me their resumes so that I can tell their story, so that I can keep unemployment front and center. Thousands of people responded and sent their resumes to me at resumesforamerica@mail.house.gov. And so tonight I want to share a few of the emails that I've received. And Mr. Speaker, I hope these stories will compel this Congress to make ending unemployment once and for all a national priority. If we can end unemployment once and for all, we can save Social Security without any cuts to Social Security. If we can end unemployment once and for all, we can take the entitlement programs off of the table. But there is very little focus on ending unemployment. Congress is focused on job creation. However, Congress's efforts historically at job creation have gotten it probably at least about a C- in terms of what most economists actually believe Congress has the power to create jobs. Congress doesn't create jobs. The private sector create jobs. Congress can offer incentives for the private sector to create jobs, but Congress cannot create jobs unless Congress is going to hire everybody, which, Mr. Speaker, is not necessarily a bad idea of Congress hiring everybody, but that's another special order. I want to talk tonight, Mr. Speaker, about these Americans who've been left behind, and at the conclusion of my remarks, hopefully offer some insight in what I think could serve as a constructive part of a conversation about ending long-term unemployment for all Americans. First, I want to spark with Linda Stable. Linda wrote a letter to Speaker Boehner. She said, "I'm a 63-year-old woman who's been laid off from my job I loved in mid-June 20th of 2009. She got laid off from her job that she loved. Since then, I've spent every day looking for work, unsuccessfully. I am a 4-time breast cancer survivor, and in December underwent my second mastectomy in 3 years. I have a small condo with a modest mortgage, but sold my car last August to help me make ends meet. Unless I'm able to find even a part-time job in a few months, I will join the ranks of the 99ers with an uncertain future. Should I lose my home? I have nowhere to go. There are many Americans who face the frightening prospect, I know, and I'm sure you receive many communications such as mine. But I do hope that you will lend your support to extending benefits for the long-term unemployed. The emotional, Physical and psychological stress of day-to-day job hunting is painful, and it's damaging beyond words. I begin each day with a hopeful outlook, but at the end of the day, restorative sleep is beyond my reach. I am talented, I have good skills, but time is running out. Please won't you make jobs a priority? Respectfully, Linda Stable. Linda, I believe that we should make jobs a priority, and ending the shameful condition of unemployment ought to be a priority of this Congress. From Michael B. Alexander, Master of Science in Real Estate Management, Master of Urban Planning, Design and Development. Hello. I willingly left my job as a city planner with the city of Largo, Florida, to pursue an MScs degree in Sweden in August of 2008. I've been looking for work all over the United States actively since August 2010 when I received my degree. While I had 4 interviews, I've easily applied for over 250 jobs between August and February. It is worth noting that I have accrued a sizable amount of debt from all of my education over the years, and I'm currently unable to make my payments. The loans are continuing to accrue interest and are currently in economic hardship deferment. Please let me know what I have in the future. I have had a pretty good life for some time now. When I was working a few years ago, times were okay. But when I returned to the USA after graduate school late last year, I was disappointed that I tried to make life better by going back to school only to regret leaving my previous stable job in Florida. I know that my life is not bad as some Americans, but I'm now starting to feel hopeless. Please keep me posted on the status of this campaign to collect resumes at resumesforamerica@mail.house.gov. Michael Alexander has sent me his resume, which I hope to insert in the congressional record. Mr. Speaker, what about all of the men and women who valiantly and bravely serve our nation in Afghanistan and Iraq, many of whom came from communities where the jobless rate was high and sought not only an opportunity to serve their nation, which they have done valiantly, but after having served their nation are returning to the United States to find unprecedented unemployment in our country. After having served our nation, after having risked their lives, after having put the last full measure of their devotion on the line to protect our freedom, can this Congress, will this Congress not stop for a moment to guarantee them remunerable work worthy of the sacrifice that they made for our nation? Or are they too to join the long list of unemployed Americans? Are they too to join the long list of Americans who find themselves and their homes in foreclosure, who find themselves without health care or without the necessary benefits to provide for their future, for their families and their loved ones? Mr. Speaker, this Congress can do better. I've been unemployed, Representative Jackson, according to Sharon Inglima, since December of 2008 with AIG for 10 years. I read on the Unemployment Examiner that you were looking for resumes from the 99ers. I've been on 20 interviews over the last 2+ years, and I've not found a job. This is not someone lazy, Mr. Speaker. Sharon Inglima is looking. I've looked online, attended job fairs and meetings. I've contacted businesses and personal contacts who are constantly looking for positions for me. I want and need to get back to work and have health care benefits. Right now, I'm on Medicaid. I'm extremely professional and a hard worker. And like so many, I can't believe this economy. Our government needs to take us seriously and feel our pain. They also need to extend our unemployment benefits. If we can't print money for every country who needs money from us, why does our government leave us out in the dust? I am sure I feel as other 99ers do, humiliated and depressed. It's tough for us to keep going, but we must. Please stand up for us. I wrote Senator Schumer and Gillibrand to support the new 99er unemployment bill, 589. We need to pass this, and if the Republicans want it paid for, please find the money. My resume is attached. Thank you, Sharon Inglima, who's writing concerning her job and the absence thereof in our economy. So, Mr. Speaker, we are in an impasse here. The President of the United States, a close and dear friend of mine, came before this Congress most recently, and I believe he mentioned the word job creation 31 times. He mentioned the word innovation, I think 11, maybe 15 times, and never mentioned unemployment one time, not one time, as if unemployment is not a factor in the lives of the American people. I come to the House floor and I hear Democrats in 1-minute speeches and 5-minute speeches. I hear Republicans talk about austerity measures and why they need to cut the budget and cut programs, which, by the way, will only lead states to cut budgets and cut programs. And guess what? There are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of Americans who are going to wake up one of these days, and guess what? There's going to be no federal program there for them. There's going to be no state programs there for them as states pursue austerity measures. I mean, is there anyone concerned about that around here? That some Americans are going to wake up one morning and there won't be a government for them, either at the state level or the federal level, because a government that is of the people, by the people, and for the people is supposed to be caring for the people? Carol Tomasetti, Congressman Jackson, I'm writing my story to be entered into the congressional record. I'm a 53-year-old educated with a bachelor's degree woman who's worked her whole life. I have 20 years of recruiting and human resource experience, and I've worked my whole life. I was laid off from my job at Nurse Finders due to the economy tanking, and here I am 2.5 years later with no job and no prospects. I have sent thousands of resumes out, and I've tried to network as much as possible to help me land something. I'm at the point where I feel my spirit is broken. I live in Rochester, New York. Need I say more? The economy here is so bad that there are no opportunities. I've even started to redirect my efforts towards administrative and customer service positions. My unemployment ran out last week, and my husband and I are in a panic mode. My husband worked at Eastman Kodak for 30 years, and I was downsized 3.5 years ago because there's no manufacturing left here. He was out of work for all that time and has since gone back to work at a job he's much too overqualified for and is making half of what he was making at Kodak. I'm ashamed that our standard of living has gone down to what it is. We own a home, and we do not live above our means. We pay our bills. We give back to our community. We live in, try to save for our retirement and buy what we have to and want to support our economy. We have never worked. Now, all of this is jeopardized because only one income in our home, and we cannot meet our bills and commitments. We now have no health insurance because we can't afford it since the unemployment ran out. The company where my husband works does not offer it because they can't afford it. I cannot believe at our age we're in this situation and going from bad to worse. I'm not looking for any handouts, Carol Tomasetti is saying. I want to give back and work. I have a life. I need assistance until I can finally find a job. When are the politicians in this country going to finally start working for the American people and not themselves? You're all self-serving. I don't believe that you are doing what it takes to turn this country around. I have no confidence in any of you, and I don't believe anything that is said. Who are you to decide our lives will be run and how they're going to be affected? Maybe you should stop sending money to every other country in the world and start worrying about our own backyard. We need help now. That's Carol J. Tomasetti from Rochester, New York. She sends her resume, hoping, Mr. Speaker, that she won't be ignored by the Congress of the United States and you will accept it into the congressional record. How about Annie Mosley? I want to thank you so much for stepping up and speaking on behalf of the unemployed. And not to bore you, in 2006, me and my husband moved into a home with $1,500. We were both working. And in July of 2008, my husband was arrested for domestic violence and spousal abuse that escalated on July 27th. This was after my brother committed suicide. My mother had a severe stroke. I took care of my brother's funeral expenses with the help of a state assistance fund. A wonderful church family and beautiful people I met along life's journey in the funeral home business. And through it all, in September of 2008, I brought my mom to live with me because I refused to allow her to live in a nursing home. And I worked in it as well as visited homes for low-income people and destitute people. Then I brought my oldest daughter to live with me because even though we were not middle class and have no college fund, she has Spelman or Georgia State majoring in pediatric medicine in her future, a dream she said she's had since the age of 4. I filed bankruptcy in January of 2009 to save my home. And I lost my job in 2009 and was forced out of bankruptcy in April of 2010. My home was saved again in July of 2010 due to the unethical practices of the Bank of America, who took over Countrywide. And by my right, should I lose my home because I don't have enough to pay an $1,800 mortgage, Mr. Speaker? I am divorced and unemployed, but God made a promise to me about my home and taking care of my mom, and I'm standing on those, but here's my resume, and I thank you again. That's from Annie Mosley. She represents thousands of Americans who are taking care of their families and their loved ones and bringing their children back home because there are no resources available in our economy to make sure she gets home. While we're sitting around here in Congress passing bills that aren't going anywhere, we have yet to address the fundamental issue of unemployment that confronts all Americans. I want to deviate from the resumes for a moment and talk about something that I think is at stake here. I've been doing a little research, Mr. Speaker, as I've been lamenting upon reading the resumes of unemployed Americans all over our country, and it's not just enough to complain about what's going wrong here. Something has to happen. Something is profoundly wrong in our democracy, in our republic, that needs to be fixed. I heard the previous speakers talk about our founding fathers and how they ultimately outlawed slavery in the passage of the 13th Amendment to the Constitution after Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863. And it occurred to me, Mr. Speaker, that from 1619, when the first slaves arrived in our country, to 1776, the greatest capitalists in the history of our world lived. They were the colonists and the traders, those who took the greatest risks to travel across oceans to land here on the shores of America. They were capitalists. They believed in trading beans and corn and gold and natural resources, and they were seeking a new life when they came to the United States of America, or came to these shores, more accurately stated. After the Somerset decision of 1774 and the reaction in the colonies that led to the Declaration of Independence in 1776, and those famous words, all men are created equal, the founders of this republic had an opportunity to say no to government. No need for government. We don't need a federal government. We no longer have the crown pursuing us. We're going to win, and we've won the Revolutionary War. We don't need government. That was their choice. But instead, Mr. Speaker, you know what they did? They chose government. They said that the American enterprise that we have been engaged in for a century and a half before the Declaration of Independence is an enterprise that we need to continue. That freedom system, that open system that allows bartering and trade, that allows activity, that allows potential economic growth. Now, however narrow in their thinking, there was full employment at that time for white male landowners. If you're a white woman, you couldn't vote. If you were African American, obviously you were in a condition of slavery. But for the architects of the republic who protected the right to vote for white male landowners, clearly all the white male landowners were doing just fine. They had full employment. Full employment. So the struggle from the founding of this country all the way to the 13th Amendment was about amending that which they established so that more Americans, Mr. Speaker, could participate in the American enterprise. I asked the Congressional Research Service the other day, how many jobs are tied to the First Amendment? That amendment added to the Constitution in 1791 by the founders of our republic. And you know what they told me? Congressman, it is impossible to calculate how many jobs are tied to the First Amendment. I said, impossible to calculate? He said, why? I said, why? He said, because to be an American is tied to the First Amendment. He said, Congressman, you must understand, which I did, that all corporate activity in America is First Amendment activity. Look at the jobs that come from the First Amendment. Washington Post, Washington Times. New York Post, New York Times. Chicago Tribune, Chicago Sun-Times. AM, FM, and all of the radio stations. First Amendment. ABC, NBC, CBS, C-SPAN, all of the jobs, First Amendment. The magazines, First Amendment. iPods, iPhones, applications, First Amendment. Times Square, First Amendment activity. Advertising, the Super Bowl, First Amendment activity. All of these jobs, the original capitalists